These were found in your workspace, the safety inspector said, holding up 3 unmarked containers with hazardous material symbols that I'd never seen before in my life. The silence in the room was suffocating as 26 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. My throat constricted. I don't know what those are, I managed to say, but my voice came out weak and unconvincing. Kenton, my manager of 6 years, stepped forward with a concerned expression that didn't match the gleam in his eyes. Tess has always pushed boundaries with her methods. I've spoken to her about proper protocols multiple times. He shook his head with practiced disappointment. I just never thought she'd go this far. The betrayal hit me like a physical force. I looked around at my colleagues, people I'd worked alongside for years, and watched them all take a collective step back, as if I were suddenly dangerous. All except Amelia and Victor, Kenton's 2 favorites, who exchanged knowing glances while trying to appear surprised. This facility has maintained an impeccable safety record for 12 years, the inspector continued, photographing the containers. Violations of this magnitude require immediate action. These unmarked substances could have caused significant harm. Security was called. 2 men in uniforms appeared at the doorway, looking uncomfortable but determined. Please gather your personal items, one said quietly. I don't understand, I whispered, feeling dizzy as the room tilted around me. I've never seen those containers before. Someone must have put them there. Kenton placed a hand on my shoulder that felt like a branding iron. Some people can hide their true nature for years, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. As I was escorted past the manufacturing floor, past the break room where I'd celebrated birthdays and project completions, past the bulletin board still displaying my Safety Innovation Award from 3 months ago, my mind raced through the events of the past week. The emergency evacuation drill yesterday that cleared our section for precisely 14 minutes. The report I'd been preparing on inventory discrepancies that was scheduled for presentation tomorrow. It wasn't coincidence, it was calculation. At home, I sat motionless on my couch as the sun shifted across the floor. 8 years of dedication erased in minutes. My phone buzzed with messages, some expressing shock, others remaining tellingly silent. One stood out. Things aren't as they seem. South Corner, Riverside Diner, 7 p.m. It came from Gwen, a maintenance worker I rarely spoke with beyond polite greetings. Before I continue this story, if you're feeling that twist of disbelief in your gut right now, hit that like button. Trust me when I say this rabbit hole goes deeper than you can imagine. Subscribe to catch the rest of this unbelievable true story, because what happens next shocked even me. I'm Tess Navarro, and until this morning, I was the senior quality manager at a manufacturing facility that produces specialized components for various industries. 8 years of spotless evaluations and 3 major safety innovations that saved the company millions in potential liability. I lived for my job, prided myself on integrity, and believed my colleagues were like family. That family just threw me to the wolves. At the diner that evening, Gwen slid into the booth with her cap pulled low, nervously scanning the room before speaking. Yesterday's drill wasn't random, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Kenton and his 2 shadows stayed behind when everyone evacuated. I was checking the utility panel in the hallway when I saw them sneaking into your section with a small package. My mind flashed to the strange containers. Why target me now? I asked. Gwen leaned closer. Those inventory tracking issues you've been investigating? They're stealing. Not supplies or equipment. Information. Manufacturing processes, chemical formulations, client specs. They've been selling secrets to overseas manufacturers for almost 3 years. How do you know this? I pressed, my heart racing. Because my brother was fired last year for asking questions about missing shipment logs. 6 former employees in total, all gone after noticing patterns. Everything clicked into place. The unexplained after-hours access logs, the missing raw materials that never showed up in waste reports, the competing products appearing in foreign markets with suspicious similarities to our own. I need proof, I said, my mind already forming connections. That's why I called you. Gwen slid a small flash drive across the table. Security footage from the loading dock. 4 months of strange deliveries that never entered the inventory system. My phone rang, displaying a number I didn't recognize. I answered hesitantly. Miss Navarro, this is Darlene from operations. We need you to return to the facility immediately. There's been a development. The drive back felt surreal. The security guards who'd escorted me out now nodded respectfully as I entered. Darlene met me in the lobby, lips pressed into a thin line. The monitoring system was reviewed as part of standard emergency protocol procedures, she explained as we walked. 3 individuals were recorded entering your workspace during yesterday's evacuation when the entire section should have been clear. In the conference room, Head of Operations Owen Pierce looked distinctly uncomfortable. The cameras show Kenton, Amelia, and Victor at your station during the evacuation window. The company board has been informed. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by suspicion at his next words. They're prepared to offer reinstatement with substantial compensation for the misunderstanding. This situation will remain internal, of course. Your discretion would be appreciated. They were buying silence. They'd sacrifice Kenton and his accomplices to protect themselves, while the underlying theft operation could continue under new management. 8 years of my life reduced to hush money. I need time to consider, I said carefully. Of course, Owen replied, sliding a document across the table. This confidentiality agreement outlines the terms. We'll need your answer by Monday. Back home, I plugged in Gwen's flash drive. The footage showed late-night deliveries, unmarked vehicles, and packages changing hands. I recognized Kenton in several clips, along with 2 executives whose names appeared on the settlement offer. This went higher than Kenton, much higher. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I created a detailed timeline, connecting inventory discrepancies with client losses and mysterious product developments by overseas competitors. Every instinct told me to sign the agreement, take the money, and walk away. But something deeper, something primal, wouldn't let me. They had tried to destroy me, not just my career, but my reputation, my dignity. The thought of them continuing while I retreated with a payoff made my hands shake with a rage I'd never known before. By morning, I had made my decision. I called my cousin Ellis, a cybersecurity specialist I hadn't spoken to in months. I need help, I said when he answered, and it needs to stay between us. Is this illegal? He asked immediately. No, I replied, but it's dangerous. For me, anyway. Ellis agreed to meet. On the way, I made another call to Joanna, my college roommate, who now worked as a financial journalist. Remember when you said you owed me for talking you out of marrying that guy who turned out to be already married? I said when she answered. I'm collecting. Over the next week, I disappeared from social media and ignored calls from colleagues. The company left increasingly urgent messages about the settlement deadline. I built a case, methodically, meticulously, gathering threads that would weave into a noose. Ellis helped me trace which overseas manufacturers had suddenly advanced with suspiciously similar technologies. Joanna connected me with industry insiders who confirmed unusual patterns in both the market and in patent applications. I located 4 of the 6 terminated employees Gwen had mentioned. Each had noticed something unusual and been quickly eliminated from the company. Together, their stories revealed a pattern spanning years. The most damning discovery came from an anonymous email, a shipping manifest linking our stolen manufacturing processes to facilities with known safety violations, where workers had been seriously injured using improperly implemented versions of our technology. This wasn't just corporate espionage. People had been hurt. When Monday arrived, I dressed carefully in a simple blue suit and flat shoes. I carried a slim portfolio containing not the signed settlement agreement, but something far more valuable. 5 executives and 3 attorneys waited in the conference room. Their confident smiles faltered when I entered alone, without legal representation. Before we proceed, I said quietly as I took my seat, you should know I've spent the past week working with industrial crime specialists across 3 countries. The room temperature seemed to plummet. Today's settlement deadline wasn't coincidental, I continued, opening my portfolio. It aligns perfectly with international authorities raiding manufacturing facilities in Thailand, Belarus, and Uruguay, all using stolen processes from this company. Owen Pierce's face drained of color. Miss Navarro, I don't know what you think. I placed a photograph on the table. It showed him shaking hands with a man identified in the caption as the CEO of one of the overseas manufacturers. Your attempts to silence me were anticipated, I said. My findings aren't just about theft. They reveal how your negligence allowed proprietary processes to reach dangerous operations overseas. I placed a second document on the table, a news article about an industrial accident in Thailand. 2 worker deaths last month have been linked directly to improperly implemented versions of our processes, I continued. I've provided statements to both industrial authorities and to the family's attorneys. The company's lead counsel reached for the documents, but I pulled them back. These are copies. The originals are with several trusted sources, along with instructions to release everything to federal authorities and media outlets if anything happens to me. The silence stretched between us, taut as a wire about to snap. "What do you want?" the CEO finally asked. I smiled for the first time since entering the room. "We haven't even started discussing that yet." "I want 3 things," I said, pulling out a slim folder. "First, a complete internal investigation with external oversight into all technology transfers from this facility over the past 5 years." The executives exchanged glances. The oldest of them, CEO Graham, cleared his throat. "That's an extensive demand that would—" "Second," I continued as if he hadn't spoken, "immediate safety reviews at all facilities using our technologies, regardless of ownership, with remediation funds established for injured workers." The company's attorney leaned forward. "Miss Navarro, you're making accusations without understanding the legal ramifications, or—" "And third," I said, my voice remaining level, "I want nothing." This silenced them completely. "Nothing for myself," I clarified. "No reinstatement, no compensation, no settlement with confidentiality clauses. I walk away completely." Graham's brow furrowed. "I don't understand. If you're not seeking personal gain, what's your objective?" I closed my portfolio slowly. "My objective is ensuring no one else gets hurt. The safety protocols I helped develop were designed to protect people. They were sold to facilities without proper training or implementation, resulting in deaths. That's why I'm here, not for money." I stood up. "You have 24 hours to initiate the investigation and safety reviews before I release everything. Your involvement will determine whether you're seen as complicit or as leaders who took responsibility when evidence emerged." I walked out, legs trembling only after I was safely in the elevator. Outside in the parking lot, I called Joanna. "It's done," I said. "Phase 1. Anyway, did they agree?" she asked. "They didn't have a choice. Start your article, but hold until I give the signal." The next 24 hours stretched endlessly. I watched news sites, industry forums, and social media for any hint of the company's response. At hour 22, it came. A press release announcing an internal review of technology transfer protocols and the establishment of an international safety initiative. What they didn't announce publicly was the storm brewing behind closed doors. Gwen texted me throughout the day with updates. Kenton escorted out by security. Federal agents interviewing staff one by one. Executive floor on lockdown. By evening, industry news sites began reporting unusual activity at the company. By morning, it was headline news across business channels. The company's stock plummeted as details emerged about compromised technologies and safety violations. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. At noon, Owen Pierce called. "We've met your demands," he said tersely. "The investigation has begun with federal oversight. Safety teams are being dispatched internationally." "Good," I replied. "Then we're done here? You'll withhold further releases of information?" "As long as the investigation remains transparent and comprehensive." 3 days later, my doorbell rang. A courier delivered an envelope containing a single sheet of paper, my termination notice, citing violation of confidentiality agreements, no mention of the planted evidence, no acknowledgement of their attempted frame-up, no apology. If you're thinking this would send most people into a spiral of rage or defeat, smash that subscribe button now, because what I did next changed not just my future, but the entire industry. That termination letter ignited something in me. They still didn't understand who they were dealing with. They thought this was finished. I was just getting started. I called Ellis. "Remember that data backup you helped me secure? I need access now." "You sure about this?" he asked. "Once we go this route, there's no turning back. They're trying to silence me through legal channels now. They think their investigation will be a controlled burn that preserves the company while sacrificing a few scapegoats." I spent the next week in Ellis's apartment, surrounded by computers, reconstructing the full scope of the technology theft ring. Kenton and his 2 assistants were merely mid-level operators in a sophisticated network that extended into 3 continents and involved millions in offshore transfers. But the executives were smart. They maintained plausible deniability, using cutouts and intermediaries. Despite the investigation, the true architects would likely escape significant consequences. "Unless I change the game entirely, I need you to introduce me to someone," I told Joanna during our nightly update call. "Who?" "Darcy Webb." Joanna went silent. Darcy Webb was a legendary industry whistleblower who had exposed criminal negligence at a chemical plant 5 years ago. She now ran an advocacy group for corporate accountability. Tess, involving Darcy means this becomes very public. Your name will be everywhere. That's exactly what I need. 2 days later, I sat across from Darcy in a quiet coffee shop 2 towns over from mine. She studied me with piercing eyes that had stared down corporate lawyers and hostile legislators. "Joanna says you have something significant," she said, skipping pleasantries. I placed a hard drive on the table. This contains evidence of an international industrial espionage operation that led to worker deaths overseas. The company has initiated an internal investigation, but they're controlling the narrative. Darcy didn't touch the drive. "And you want what exactly?" "I want the full truth exposed, not just the sanitized version they're preparing. I want accountability at all levels, not just the convenient scapegoats." "Why come to me? You could go to federal authorities directly." I leaned forward. "Because authorities follow procedures and legal boundaries. The evidence trail has deliberate gaps. The executives will claim ignorance while sacrificing middle management. You know how to apply pressure where it matters most. Public opinion." Darcy nodded slowly. "This will make you a target, not just from the company, but potentially from industry allies, investors with deep pockets, even politicians who receive their donations." "I understand." She finally picked up the drive. "What's your timeline?" "They're moving quickly to contain this. We need to move faster." What happened next unfolded with breathtaking speed. Darcy's organization released key findings to selected journalists, timing the revelations to counter the company's controlled narrative. International business publications ran stories detailing how American manufacturing technologies were transferred illegally to facilities with substandard safety protocols. Most powerful were the stories of injured workers, faces, and names attached to the consequences of corporate greed. Families in rural Thailand and Uruguay described loved ones injured by machinery they weren't properly trained to operate, using processes developed for highly controlled environments but implemented without proper safeguards. The company's carefully constructed investigation began unraveling as public pressure mounted. Regulatory agencies in 7 countries announced their own inquiries. Clients began suspending contracts, pending resolution. Then came the counterattack. I woke to my name trending on industry social media platforms. Anonymous sources questioned my motives, expertise, and mental stability. Carefully cropped photos suggested inappropriate relationships with colleagues. Old performance reviews, clearly altered, surfaced suggesting a history of safety violations on my part. My phone rang constantly with reporters seeking comment. Unmarked vehicles parked outside my apartment. Strange men followed me when I ventured out for groceries. "They're desperate," Darcy reassured me. "This means we're winning." But the pressure was intense. Each day brought new allegations, each more absurd than the last. Former colleagues were pressured to give statements questioning my character. My parents called, confused and concerned about news reports they'd seen. The isolation grew overwhelming. I stayed with Ellis for safety, then moved to Joanna's when strange cars appeared outside his building. Sleep became elusive. Appetite vanished. I jumped at unexpected sounds. "Maybe we should pause," Joanna suggested one evening, watching me pace her living room. "Let things cool down." "That's exactly what they want," I replied. "For me to break, to disappear, to become a question mark that undermines the evidence." The next morning, I received a text from an unknown number. "South parking lot, Memorial Hospital, 3 p.m., come alone." "It's a trap," Ellis insisted when I showed him. "Probably," I agreed. "But what if it's not?" We devised precautions. Ellis would monitor via video call. Joanna would wait nearby. I would stay in public view at all times. At precisely 3 p.m., I stood in the busy hospital parking lot, phone ready to dial emergency services. A white sedan pulled up, and the back door opened. Inside sat Amelia, Kenton's former assistant and one of the people who had planted evidence in my workspace. "You've got 5 minutes," I said, remaining outside the car. Her face was drawn, eyes darting nervously. "They're going to make me the fall person," she said. "Kenton promised he'd protect me, but he's cutting deals to save himself." "Why tell me? I'm not exactly sympathetic to your situation." "Because I kept backup copies of everything," she replied. "Every email, every transfer authorization, every communication with overseas buyers, including messages directly from Graham and the board authorizing the technology transfers while knowing about the safety risks." My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. "What do you want?" "Immunity. I'll testify about everything. The setup against you, the executive involvement, the entire operation, in exchange for protection from prosecution." "I'm not a prosecutor. I can't offer immunity." But you know people now who can make that happen. She glanced at her watch. I'm scheduled to meet federal investigators tomorrow. I need an answer before then. How do I know this isn't another setup? Amelia handed me a thumb drive. Preview of what I have. Enough to show I'm serious. Not enough to protect me without my testimony. I'll be at this same spot tomorrow at noon. Let me know your decision. She closed the car door and drove away, leaving me holding potentially explosive evidence, or another elaborate trap. Back at Joanna's apartment, we debated for hours. Ellis examined the drive carefully before opening it on a secure laptop. What we found exceeded my expectations. Email chains showing executive knowledge of safety risks, financial projections of cost savings by skipping proper training at overseas facilities, and discussion of maintaining plausible deniability in case of accidents. This changes everything, Joanna whispered. If it's authentic, I cautioned. Only one way to find out, Ellis said. We need expert verification fast. Through Darcy's connections, we secured an independent digital forensics expert who worked through the night analyzing the files. By morning, we had confirmation. The evidence was genuine and unaltered. I called Darcy with our discovery. This is exactly what we needed, she said. With this and her testimony, we can push past the middle management firewall. The question is, do we trust her? That question haunted me as noon approached. Amelia had been part of the conspiracy against me. She had helped plant evidence that could have destroyed my career and reputation. Now she offered alliance out of self-preservation, not remorse. Yet her betrayal of Kenton and the executives could be the key to true accountability. What are you going to do? Joanna asked as I prepared to leave for the meeting. I checked my phone one last time and saw a breaking news alert that made my decision clear. I'm going to take down an entire system, I replied, not just a few individuals. The breaking news alert showed a company press release announcing a major restructuring. Kenton had been officially terminated for procedural violations, while the board expressed full confidence in CEO Graham's leadership through this challenging transition period. They were already constructing their narrative. A few bad apples had been removed, allowing the company to move forward unblemished. I arrived at the hospital parking lot 5 minutes early. This time, Amelia was already waiting, sitting tensely on a bench near the entrance. She looked smaller somehow, her confident demeanor replaced by nervous vigilance. You saw the announcement, she said as I approached. I nodded. They're sacrificing Kenton while Graham keeps his golden parachute. They're negotiating plea deals as we speak. Kenton, Victor, and I take the fall. The executives claim they were deceived by their trusted team. Her laugh was bitter. 8 years I worked for them. Now I'm disposable. Welcome to my world, I said without sympathy. She flinched. I deserve that, but I'm not here for forgiveness. What exactly do you have that federal investigators don't already? Digital signatures, personal email accounts, recordings of meetings. She leaned forward. Graham and the board didn't just know about the technology transfers, they designed the entire operation. They calculated the profit margins against potential legal exposure if accidents happened overseas. My stomach tightened. They did risk assessments on human lives? Precisely. They determined that settlements for foreign worker injuries would cost less than proper safety implementations. She checked her watch. My meeting with federal investigators is in 4 hours. I need to know if you can help secure immunity. I studied her carefully. Why come to me instead of going directly to the authorities with an immunity request? Because they don't trust me. I'm already labeled as Kenton's accomplice. Her eyes met mine. But you've become the credible whistleblower. Your word carries weight now. I made my decision. I'll call my contact at the Industrial Crimes Task Force. I can't guarantee immunity, but I can get you a meeting with people who can make those decisions. Relief washed over her face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If you're holding anything back or trying to manipulate the situation, I'll make sure you get the harshest sentence possible. Amelia handed me another drive. Everything's here. Not copies. Originals. I'm all in now. 3 hours later, I sat in a federal building conference room with Amelia and 2 investigators. She spoke for nearly 2 hours, detailing the espionage operation from inception to execution. The evidence she provided corroborated her testimony: email chains, meeting recordings, financial transfers that created a damning picture of executive involvement. When she finished, the lead investigator turned to me. Miss Navarro, your initial report helped launch this investigation. Based on what you've heard today, do you find Miss Chen's testimony consistent with your findings? It explains gaps in my evidence, I confirmed. The operations couldn't have functioned without executive approval and coordination. Amelia received limited immunity in exchange for her complete cooperation and testimony. As she signed the agreement, she looked up at me. They really thought you would just go away with a settlement check. They never saw you coming. People underestimate what happens when you corner someone with nothing left to lose, I replied. The next week unfolded like a slow-motion earthquake. Federal agents arrived at company headquarters with search warrants. Graham and 3 board members were brought in for questioning. The company's stock plummeted further as institutional investors abandoned ship. Joanna's exposé ran in a major business publication, detailing the human cost of the company's negligence. Injured workers and their families were featured prominently, alongside a timeline of executive decisions that prioritized profit over safety. I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Miss Navarro? The voice was unfamiliar. This is Patricia Lane. I'm head of operations at Westover Manufacturing. My guard immediately went up. Westover was our largest competitor. I've been following recent developments with interest, she continued. Our company is implementing advanced safety protocols across our international partnerships. We need someone with your expertise and integrity. Would you consider meeting to discuss opportunities with us? The offer was unexpected. I'll think about it, I replied noncommittally. Please do. We value professionals who stand by their principles. After disconnecting, I sat in silence, contemplating this new direction. Part of me wanted distance from the industry that had nearly destroyed me. Another part recognized the opportunity to implement proper safety standards on a global scale. My phone buzzed with a news alert. CEO and board members indicted on multiple charges including conspiracy, fraud, and negligent homicide. The moment should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt drained. The vindication was real but hollow compared to the damage done to workers overseas, to honest employees caught in the fallout, to my own sense of security. That evening, I received a text from Gwen. Turn on Channel 7 News now. I clicked on the television to see Graham being escorted from his home in handcuffs. The camera captured his face, shocked, outraged, entitled Even in Disgrace. The reporter detailed the charges: conspiracy, wire fraud, industrial espionage, and negligent homicide related to overseas worker deaths. Sources close to the investigation credit a former employee's detailed evidence with breaking the case open, the reporter concluded. Tess Navarro, a quality manager allegedly framed for safety violations, provided authorities with crucial documentation that led to today's arrests. My phone exploded with notifications. Former colleagues reached out with apologies and congratulations. Industry contacts expressed admiration. Reporters requested interviews. I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet of my apartment. This wasn't over yet. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I arrived early, taking a seat at the back of the courtroom. One by one, the defendants entered, Kenton looking defeated, Victor and Amelia subdued, and finally Graham and the board members, their expensive suits unable to mask their discomfort. Their attorneys presented arguments for dismissal, claiming insufficient evidence and procedural errors. The prosecution countered by introducing new evidence, the complete files Amelia had provided, now authenticated and organized into a devastating timeline of corporate malfeasance. The judge denied all motions to dismiss and set trial dates. As the defendants were let out, Graham spotted me, his face contorted with rage before his attorney hurriedly whispered something that made him look away. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around key figures. I tried to slip away unnoticed, but was intercepted by a journalist I recognized from National Business News. Miss Navarro, can we get your reaction to today's ruling? I hesitated, then decided to speak. This isn't about personal vindication. It's about accountability. When companies treat safety as an inconvenient expense rather than a moral obligation, people get hurt. I hope this case establishes that executive decisions have consequences, regardless of how many layers of deniability they try to create. Over the following months, I consulted with prosecutors, reviewed evidence, and prepared to testify. The process was exhausting but necessary. Meanwhile, I accepted Patricia's offer at Westover. With specific conditions, I would develop and oversee an international safety standards program with full auditing authority. 3 days before the trial was scheduled to begin, Joanna called with news. They're offering plea deals. Graham and the board will plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation against international partners. Reduced from what to what? I asked. From potential 20-year sentences to 5 years. eligible for parole in 3. Anger flared in my chest. After everything they did? After people died because of their decisions? The prosecutors say it guarantees convictions without a lengthy trial. Plus, it includes full restitution to injured workers and their families. I wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted the public trial, wanted them to face the full weight of their actions in open court. Another part recognized that plea deals would provide immediate compensation to victims rather than years of appeals. There's more, Joanna continued. The plea deals include a provision that none of them can ever serve as officers or directors of public companies again. Their careers are effectively over. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, considering what true justice looked like in this situation. Money couldn't restore lost lives or health. Prison terms, however long, wouldn't undo the damage. What mattered was ensuring it couldn't happen again. Not by these people, not by this company, not in this industry. The next morning, I called the lead prosecutor. I support the plea agreements on one condition, I said. I want to be present for the hearing. I want them to see me when they admit what they did. 2 weeks later, I sat in the front row of the courtroom as Graham and the others entered their guilty pleas. The judge asked each defendant to acknowledge their actions in their own words. When Graham's turn came, he spoke mechanically, admitting to failures of oversight and inadequate safety protocols. The judge interrupted him. Mr. Graham, I want to be clear about what happened here. Did you knowingly authorize the transfer of proprietary technology to facilities you knew lacked proper safety implementations? Graham glanced at his attorney, who nodded slightly. Yes, Your Honor. And were you aware that this decision created substantial safety risks for workers at those facilities? A longer pause. Yes, Your Honor. And did you participate in framing Miss Navarro when she began uncovering evidence of these activities? Graham's jaw tightened. He looked directly at me for the first time. Yes, Your Honor. The judge accepted the plea agreements but added his own statement. The court finds the negotiated sentences appropriate only with the understanding that they're accompanied by lifetime bans from corporate leadership, full financial restitution, and the defendant's complete cooperation with ongoing international investigations. As the proceedings concluded, I felt a weight lifting, not entirely gone, but lighter. Outside the courthouse, I made a brief statement to the assembled press. Today isn't about revenge, it's about responsibility. When we design safety protocols, we're protecting real people with families who depend on them. No corporate profit margin is worth a human life. I hope other executives remember this case when they're tempted to cut corners on safety. 6 months later, I stood in Westover's main manufacturing facility, watching as safety inspectors from 3 countries conducted joint certification procedures under new international standards I had helped develop based on lessons from my previous company's failures. My phone buzzed with a news notification. Graham had been transferred to a minimum security facility after providing evidence against international partners. His wife had filed for divorce. Their family home had been sold to help pay restitution to victims. I put my phone away and continued the inspection tour. This was my focus now, building systems that protected people rather than punishing those who had failed them. That evening, I received an email from Darcy Webb. Thought you might want to see this. Attached was a prison interview with Kenton. The reporter asked if he had any message for me. Kenton looked directly into the camera, aged beyond his years. She was always the smartest person in the room. We should have listened to her instead of trying to silence her. Now we have all the time in the world to think about that mistake. If this story struck a chord with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Remember that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about making sure the system changes so what happened to you can never happen to anyone else. Comment below if you've ever stood up against wrongdoing, even when it seemed impossible. Your story matters too.